before I dive into my topic, I'm trying to see if I can. I'm using a software called Lula to see if I can actually stream live on multiple channels at once. So may not actually work in my favor. We'll sort of see here. But I did do this talk previously on my Facebook page, Freedom Nutrition Coaching, and you can see it there as well, and some of the follow up from that. But so let's dive into this here. So I want to talk about mindless eating, what we can do about it, what is it, how do you take back control, and move forward from it. So, how do you stop mindless eating? First of all, let's say I think if when it comes to mindless eating, most of us experience a situation something like this. You know what, actually? Yeah. Deviation Wellness, how you doing? Right on. So basically, let's say this. You pop a bowl of popcorn, or you pull out a bag of chips, you sit in front of a television or Netflix, and you start watching something, and bang, before you know it, you look at the end of a bowl, end of a bottle, end of a bag, something like that, and you know what? You're just like, how on earth did this just happen? How the heck did this happen? Sometimes it's grabbing a snack from the vending machine at work, on your coffee break, and then you just go and you destroy the entire thing. At the end of like these sorts of mindless eating episodes, oftentimes we encounter like difficult emotions, difficult feelings, and we say, how do I stop like mindless eating? What went on, right? But before we dive into like how to stop mindless eating, let's actually talk about what it actually is, right? So I want to break it down and kind of tell you the steps you can take to put it, like basically put an end to it for once and for all, right? So what is mindless eating? Mindless eating is basically when we eat with little to no awareness around our food or how we feel, right? And typically, a bout of mindless eating is gonna follow the same sort of cognitive path here, right? First of all, there's a trigger. There's a reason why we start eating. There's always a reason why we start eating, right? But then everything's quickly a blur. And then all of a sudden the food is gone and you're like, what the heck just happened? How did that happen, right? So, and then usually after like a mindless eating episode is followed by negative emotions like regret, disappointment, guilt, and this stirs up a bunch of crappy self-talk, stuff like, why do I keep doing this? Why can't I say no? I can't seem to stop myself. Why does it feel like I have no self-control? Does any of that sound familiar? So why do we eat mindlessly anyways? And there's so many factors that play into why we actually eat mindlessly in the 21st century, but I want to talk about the two biggest reasons why this happens. First of all, we're constantly distracted. We surround ourselves with distraction. How many of you, like at home, you keep a TV on in the background, you got phone notifications buzzing and dinging, maybe you got kids, like it's nearly impossible to actually tune in and pay attention to our food when we have everything around us that's like fighting for and competing for our attention, right? Now add to that, your mind is racing because you're stressed about, I don't know, whatever you're going to do tonight, what happened at work today, you're worried about school, you're worried about your family, your kids, whatever. We're buzzing with dozens of thoughts at any given moment. So essentially our brains are feeling overwhelmed with kind of the near constant, I would say like hyper stimulation of our minds. So everything around us is competing for time and attention and really stopping us from focusing on what we eat, how much we eat, and that just kind of gets shoved right out of the picture, right? The second factor that contributes to it is our environment. Do you ever eat food because it's literally just there, right? Think about the amount of food that we're exposed to on a daily basis, right? It's like at work, you have people with candy dishes hanging out, right? At home, you got stuff hanging out on your counter. What about driving to and from work? If you're listening to the radio, what are you going to hear? You're going to hear ads to eat food. You know what? You're driving. What are you going to see? Billboards showing giant pictures of juicy hamburgers and crispy French fries. Like the thing is, we're exposed to food every single day, probably hundreds of times a day, and we actually make, I think, over 200 food decisions a day. Right? So when we think about it in this light here as well, right? With like immediate access and constant reminders and cues to eat, like it is so difficult to not eat, right? Now, although I just touched on distraction and the environment we're surrounded with, and they're two of the most significant influencers, there's one more thing I want to touch on, and that is this idea of we actually intentionally check out, right? So we actually intentionally shut off our awareness and we decide that we're going to check out and we're going to eat mindlessly, right? So here's a scenario, for example. Let's say you had an argument with your coworker at work today. You get home and you're greeted by, you'll never guess what happened today. The dog crapped on the carpet, the baby peed on the floor, whatever. In any case, something's going on where you're greeted with like a sense of stress and overwhelm, and you're starting to feel really, really uncomfortable. So what do? You head to the kitchen, you head to the pantry, and you start scratching around and digging for something to eat, right? Or let's just say you had a really stressful morning at work. It's you finally get a chance to sit down and eat, and you just want to zone out and chill out for a minute. So the first thing you do is you whip out your phone and you start scrolling through social media. You're not even paying attention to what you're eating. It's literally hand to mouth while you're playing Candy Crush or scrolling social media, whatever, right? What we're doing in scenarios like this is we're actually finding something that will make us feel better to help us relax, or simply like wipe out stress, or at least try to put the pause button on stress. So we're actually deliberately flipping off the awareness switch, right? And see, it doesn't matter why we eat mindlessly, because the result of mindless eating ends up being the same. The problem is when we eat too much, and when we do it often enough, we're going to gain weight, right? Mindless eating leads to overeating, and overeating leads to unnecessary weight gain, and that weight that's going to be gained is not going to be muscle, right? So what starts as a snack can easily turn into a mini binge or even a full-blown binge. And here's the real kick in the junk, right? When we eat too much, what we're actually doing is we're training ourselves to ignore our stomach's fullness signals, right? And this can have long-term negative effects. Mainly, when we ignore or aren't even aware of what fullness feels like, we completely lose the ability to sense when we're satisfied and should stop eating. So then what happens is we start to compensate every time we eat, because we feel like we have to eat more and more just to feel full. So there's a real skill, or even an art, could we say, to eating mindfully or eating with awareness, right? Because the solution on the surface, it sounds really simple. To stop mindless eating, you have to start mindfully eating, right? That sounds easy, but what do we actually mean by that? How do you take this and put this into practice, right? So the first thing is excuse me, we actually need to commit to the process that we're going to make conscious decisions about when to start and when to stop eating. So I want to talk about 5 things you can do to basically take back control, take back your sense of why you're not eating out of control, right? And the first thing is, step 1, figure out why the heck you're eating in the first place, right? Why are you eating? Because all eating starts with a right? It could be that you're actually physically hungry. Sometimes that's the trigger. This is the time you normally eat. Like when I was in the Navy, I would eat at 5 p.m. every single day. So even when I wasn't on the ship, when I would go home, my brain told me I needed to eat at 5 p.m., right? Maybe it's your habit to always whip out a snack, a bowl of chips or popcorn when you're watching TV, Netflix, whatever, right? Maybe you're hanging out with friends, everybody else is eating. Or simply you want to check out. There's an emotional reason, like you want to feel good. You want to check out from your stress, things like that, right? So before you go to eat, figure out why the heck you're actually eating. Are you eating because you're hungry? Are you eating because you want to, some other reason? Because once we figure out why we're going to eat, then we can actually make an informed decision on, hey, this is the time to eat, or maybe I'm going to check out and I'm not going to eat right now. I'll go and do something else, right? So now, if you're going to eat, choose to eat mindfully. So call it step 2. Choose to eat mindfully or consciously or with awareness, right? Eating mindfully is a choice. You can choose to shut off when you eat, or you can actually choose to tune in and enjoy your food. So the goal with mindful eating is to actually focus on the food you're consuming and the experience of eating. The funny thing is, the crazy thing is, we actually feel guilty about enjoying food because we have such conflicted emotions. We have such a disordered relationship with food, right? And yet, the irony is, like, one of the benefits of eating mindfully is that you actually enjoy your food more, right? You enhance the enjoyment of eating. Eating can be extremely enjoyable and actually give us pleasure, Here's the thing. When we're eating, anyone who says stuff like food is just fuel is naive, or trying to fool themselves, or is trying to smother conflicted emotions that they feel around food, right? Food is almost never just fuel. Our culture revolves around food. Socialization revolves around food. The holiday season, every holiday season revolves around food. So it's pretty dumb to disregard the fact that when we try to smother emotions, all that's going to happen is you're going to end up with a bigger outburst later, right? And when these bigger outbursts happen, there's even less of a feeling of being in control, more distress around the eating episode. So it just doesn't make sense to deny ourselves one of life's great enjoyments, which is actually eating food. So slow down, be aware, be there, and actually enjoy what you're eating. So how can we do this? First of all, eating in itself, there's so much in terms of conflicted emotions around eating. I'm going to sit down and eat, but I feel so conflicted around it. Well, let me paint you a picture here, right? Because you should look forward to eating. It should be something that you enjoy. So let's say there's a new movie out. You've been waiting for, I don't know, you've been watching all the trailers. Maybe it's a new Star Wars flick or whatever the hot movie of the year is or something. I mean, does anybody actually go to movie theaters anymore? Let's pretend you actually do, because here's what happens. Let's say you go to the theater early, you grab a seat, you're excited about watching the movie, and then you know what? You just whip out your phone and you start watching videos on YouTube instead of watching the movie. That's nuts, right? Like, here's the thing. We should actually look forward to eating. We should treat mealtime like an event that we look forward to, right? Stop pretending that like eating isn't enjoyable, that food is just fuel, or those sort of narratives. Actually plan to enjoy your meal. I know it sounds crazy, but remove distractions, slow down, focus on just enjoying your meal, and let eating slowly and savoring and enjoying the food that you eat be the time that you check out, de-stress, and relax, but you're present with your food. And when you're done eating, like stop when you're satisfied. So when we eat mindfully, we actually pay attention to when we get full or when we get satisfied, right? And what we're searching for, like when I say satisfied, what does it actually feel like? Well, if I was to paint you a scale, like from 1 to 10, it would kind of go something like this. 1 to 2, you're starving, you're ravenous, you're starting to look at your left arm and think, you know what, that's looking pretty tasty right now, right? You could call this like primal or animalistic hunger, like, ugh, you know, you'd eat roadkill if it was put in front of you. That's like ravenously hungry. 3 to 4 is kind of like your normal hunger pangs, like you're not starving, but you're ready to eat, and a steady, consistent sort of pressure is there. Then you start eating. 5 to 6 is like when you're satisfied. You know, that's the point you've known, like you've eaten less than you need to be stuffed, but you've knocked away, hunger's not there anymore, right? You're satisfied, right? 7 or 8, that's when you eat to being like completely full. You could have stopped at a 6, but you ate more, and now it might even start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. 9 or 10, that's loosen the belt, uncomfortable. That's how you feel after a huge dinner or a binge, right? This is the extremely uncomfortable fullness where there's a lot of negative emotions like guilt and shame starting to creep in. The point is sharing this little sort of 1 to 10 scale here is we're shooting for satisfied. Now, the only way to actually get there is to slow down and listen, right? Because satisfied, if satisfied was like our body communicating to us, it's actually like a whisper. If you're not listening or paying attention, you completely miss it, right? So now, the step 5, if there is a step 5, let's just say you had a crappy eating episode, right? Something less than ideal happened. Thing is, this is not about being perfect, right? We just need to practice. Like every meal is an opportunity to learn about ourselves, learn more about our relationship with food, how we interact with it, and turn it into something like that affects our future choices and behavior. So let's say you had a less than ideal eating episode. Think about it from start to finish. What was going on before the meal started? Were you stressed, angry, lonely, bored, celebrating? What was happening, right? Who were you with? All that kind of stuff, right? Maybe you got distracted by, I don't know, watching something on Netflix. Maybe you just, I don't know, you were stressed out about work and you just felt like you had to tune out mentally and boom, you pulled out your phone, whatever. The point is, if things didn't go the way that you wanted to that particular meal, shoot to do better next time, right? Don't miss twice. It's never the first mistake, never the first like screwed up meal that like ruins your efforts to be healthier, right? It's when it becomes a repeated pattern of behavior that it becomes a problem, right? So the thing is, every time we actually make the decision to eat mindfully, right, taking back control, feeling in control again as you making the conscious decision, I'm starting eating and I'm stopping eating, right? Deciding to stay checked in and aware. So every time we choose to do this, to eat in this way, we actually figure out new ways to stay tuned in, and we get more enjoyment out of our food, right? So every time we eat mindfully, we're basically setting ourselves up for a better long-term relationship with food, right? So now, in today's world where it feels almost crushingly relentless, this is a skill that actually requires practice. And it almost sounds crazy even to say that. The fact that we actually need to practice learning how to listen to our bodies and tune in. Learning how to tune into internal cues instead of just external reminders like, is my plate empty, you know? Now to complicate that further, sometimes internal cues, they get messed up too, right? But emotional eating, like, yeah, it kind of clouds the water, it muddies the signal, whatever you want to say right there. So here's how you tell if you're about to emotionally eat, right? I want to help you figure this out. It's a simple question, but it's powerful, right? And it's going to help you figure out and identify if you're eating for the right reasons, right? Because one of the top reasons for people being overweight is because we eat when we're not actually physically hungry, right? We're eating emotionally, we're eating mindlessly, or we're eating habitually. So here's the question I want you to ask yourself. Am I using this food or am I eating this food, right? So here's what I mean. We use food all the time. We use it for entertainment. We use it for pleasure. We use it for comfort, for self-soothing, for security, for, instead of eating food to be nourished, to be healthy, to be energized, to be vibrant, So there's a big difference between using food versus eating it. Now, let's just say, okay, cool. I'm constantly checking in and I'm going to use food anyways. All right, you're already making progress because you switched from mindless to mindful eating, even if you're choosing to eat for a less than ideal reason, right? And that's the idea. This is not about all or nothing. And I want people to shift their perspective around eating, right? It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress, right? And that's, this is how I can see like my client struggles in such a positive light, right? So let's say you're about to use food. You could ask yourself a simple question. What is really going on here? Like, what am I really looking to do? What am I hungry? It's never about food. That's the secret. And then, okay, I figured out what the heck is bugging me. Okay, cool. What can I do about it? If anything, because sometimes you might not be able, life sometimes just sucks and you can't do anything about it, right? But if you can do something about it, the next question is, why don't I do anything about it? Why am I not doing anything about it? Right? And the third question is the kicker, because it's easier in the moment to do nothing. But the thing is, we know that suppressing our feelings does not erase them. It just means they're going to show up later, but this time they're going to bring friends. So we might as well face them sooner rather than later. The sooner we face up to whatever is bothering us and giving us heck, the sooner that we can actually move forward. And I like kind of using the phrasing, the sooner we face our stuff, the less likely we're going to stuff our face, right? And the thing is, when we actually face up to the uncomfortable emotions, when we face up to the cravings and the urges, these actually, they start to subside and lose their power over you. So what we eat, yes, absolutely matters. And Lifestyle 180, it'll absolutely teach you that. But what really sets this apart, besides community, support, and accountability, is we talk about why you're eating. And that's really where the magic is. When we understand why we're eating, it's a lot easier to change what we're eating and when we're eating. And that's really when the magic happens. And that's why we get the results we do with Lifestyle 180. And the idea is, and this is why we also get results that are sustainable, because Lifestyle 180 has always been about getting people permanent results. Not a quick fix. It's not a 8-week diet and done. What we're doing is we're actually changing the way we think and react to food. So let me just quickly tie this up in a pretty bow. Here's how you deal with mindless eating. 1, figure out why the heck you're eating in the first place. What do you really want? What are you actually hungry for? If you're going to eat, number 2, choose to eat mindfully. Don't check out. And number 3, actually enjoy your food. Be present. Make it something that's a highlight of your day. Actually enjoy it. Eat it slowly. Taste your food. Number 4, stop when you're satisfied. Don't eat until you're stuffed. The way to think about it, imagine being able to go for a pleasant, 10-minute stroll if it's not minus 50 out in the wintertime, going for a pleasant stroll after a meal. And lastly, if you had a bad eating episode, reflect on it and learn from it. Approach it with curiosity and compassion. Don't beat yourself up. That doesn't help. Just take your lessons from it and move forward. So there you have it. That's my ideas around emotional eating and mindless eating and how we can work to conquer it. Hopefully that's been helpful. If it